You know, at this point, I feel like beggars can't be choosers, so I'll take it. With that said, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly My Hero Academia Season 5 discussion videos. Today we're here to talk all about Episode 23, Tenko Shimura Origin. But before we get to the video proper, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, set notifications to all, let all of AniTube know that you care, boop that up snoot if you feel like it as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this week's episode, shall we? And we shall. As usual, with My Hero videos, and I think pretty much going forward with most videos, I'm going to split things down into the good, the things I liked, and the things I maybe didn't like as much. And usually I feel like with most shows, it's going to be more good. I know this is going to shock some anime-onlys for My Hero, but I am usually quite easy to please. You saw me during most other videos, hopefully. I'm kind of easy to please. This half of the season, though, is... yeah, not that. But there is a lot of good this week. Like a fair amount. I wouldn't say like it's all good, but it's there's mostly good. There's good, and then there's mostly good. And this is mostly good. So, as usual, as I've been saying with most things this season, I think we should start just by addressing the fact that Uchiyama is holding this series on his back. Koki Uchiyama's, apologies for my terrible pronunciation, as Shigaraki, absolutely holding it down, killing it. The man just consistently is a solid seiyuu, absolutely gets the character, even when it feels like the series composition nor the series directors seem to know what the hell to do with Shigaraki. Uchiyama always knows how to deliver. I feel like he's the one guy who gets the friggin' character in the whole series right now, but that's okay. But yeah, Uchiyama absolutely nails it as Shigaraki, and I have to give credit to whoever they got to be young Shigaraki. I couldn't quite figure out who that was, but they did a phenomenal job. Like, both Uchiyama as, like, current-day Shigaraki and the young Shigaraki absolutely slayed it. I think they did such a phenomenal job, and I think maybe it's because, you know, I've been around the block, and I've been an actor myself. Voice acting is difficult, so I know how tricky it is to sort of embody these characters, especially characters as sort of perverse and macabre as Shigaraki. I think they absolutely did a phenomenal job, and Uchiyama always does a great job, but I, again, have to give the man praise every chance that I can, and also praise to young Shigaraki as well. I think both seiyus absolutely crushed it, but also I do want to give a nod to Ryo Iwasaki as Spinner, because Lord knows the show is not going to give Spinner any praise, so I might as well. I thought Iwasaki did a great job. Spinner gets absolutely shafted, as with every episode that the League is featured in, but again, we will get to that in a bit. But I thought his performance as Spinner this week is great. He delivers like his lines with the passion of a man who feels as though society's put him in a corner and not let him out. And I feel like Iwasaki really gets the character. Again, even if the series composers and the series directors don't, Iwasaki does, and I have to give the man credit, because again, voice acting, as I've said, very difficult profession, and I think they do a phenomenal job. I would be curious to know if anybody is watching the dub. I don't know if the dub is being simulcast or not, but I would be curious to know if the seiyuu for Shigaraki and Spinner are doing as well over there as they are in the Japanese dub, because I feel as though the Japanese seiyuu always crush it. I'm not the biggest fan of the My Hero dub. I really don't like Deku. Like, there's a lot of characters that I just don't like dubbed. Like, I really just, no. But I don't believe I've ever heard Spinner or Shigaraki. So, you know, maybe they're great. I don't know. But, yeah, when it comes to the acting in the Japanese dub, Uchiyama, Iwasaki do a phenomenal job this week, as they usually do, to be fair. But the other big thing that I have to praise this week's episode for, and I mean like praise, Shiggy's origins. Oh my god, I was hoping they wouldn't blow it, and for the most part they didn't. It's not perfect. There's a lot that I'm like, I wish they put this in, or oh, I wish they did that better. But for the most part, it's they did a good job. Good. This is supposed to be the good portion of the video. They did a good job, and I'm not just saying that to be nice. They genuinely, in my opinion, did a good job. There's stuff that, again, I wish that they had put in, and there's stuff that I wish that they did better, but for the most part, I think they genuinely did a good job. And there was, and here we go, even though I've been making fun of them, there was some solid direction in this week's episode, and my credit has to go to Chief Director Kenji Nagasaki and this season's director Masahiro Mukai, because I've been really hard on these two, and whoever is, because I've seen people be like, what about the episode director? The episode director is important, but for the most part, they're episode directors and stuff like that are usually just kind of listening to, like, episode directors and episode writers are usually just listening to either the series composition or the main director, or in this case, the main director and the chief director. But episode direction is still important, so my credit to the episode director as well. But yeah, for the most part, you're kind of pointing to, like, series director. Because it's their sort of creative vision for that season. So that's why when there's a chief director and a regular director, it's sort of muddled, because I'm like, whose vision is this? Because I know I know Nagasaki's direction, right? Because he's been director for My Hero since the start, since season 1. Although I believe starting at season 4, he became chief director instead of regular director, which actually, the more I think about it, makes sense. I may have to look into that. That might not be totally correct, so don't take me at my word on that. But I believe it was after Series 4 that he became Chief Director, which I assume is maybe still has his, like, hand guiding it, but a bit more at a distance, which could explain a lot. But for the most part, I'm one of those people who will go to bat for Season 4. I think Season 4 is actually really good. And I believe Mukai also directed Season 4, but again, I might be off base on that. But I have been hard on these two, right? And the episode directors for the series as a whole this season. So I've been hard on them, but it's because I know that they can do better. And I was sort of unimpressed with this half of the season because, again, you can do better. I really felt this season that they were slacking. And I feel as though that this might be attributed to the fact that Bones is maybe sort of in a tough spot with maybe just My Hero. I will say Bones has their hand in a lot of pies, and I had somebody be like really snotty to me in the comments saying that I didn't know what I was talking about or whatever in regards to the fact that I said I was a little worried for Bones. And this commenter assumed that I was saying that I was worried for Bones because the show was bad, and I don't give a shit if the show was bad. What I was worried about is if the animators, directors, and writers over in the studio are doing okay. Because at the end of the day, will I be annoyed if this season is bad? Hell yeah, you've heard me complain about it. But it doesn't matter. What matters is the well-being of the people making the thing we like. I want to know that they're okay. It's one of the reasons why I love KyoAni so much, because KyoAni puts in the work to make sure that their employees are treated well. Otherwise you have a situation like you had with Mappa, where employees were literally being treated like cattle, which is hilarious because I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they left Madhouse in the first place to make Mappa. But yeah, that's my big concern, is that I don't want these people to be overworked. And I was a little worried about that for a bit. Like, I am a little worried about the amount of staff being thrown at these different shows just to get them done, right? I'm looking at you, Vanitas, but even My Hero, right? So I know that things might be stressful at Bones. I don't know for certain, but I have a good inkling that things might be stressful depending on the project, right? Vanitas is its own project, of course. I'm not saying that there's much overlap there. But what I'm saying is that if one project at the studio is doing this poorly, then others might be affected. I can think of like video game studios that go through that, where one project is affected and therefore the others are also affected because you have to take staff members from other things and pull them to help work on the thing that's broken, and it results in a clusterfuck. And the same thing is happening seemingly with Bones. Even add in the My Hero movie on top of that, and it makes the studio feel like it's claustrophobic to work in right now, like that it's like overwhelming. And so the fact that an episode like this can come out and it's genuinely really solid, I feel like that's a testament to how hard they're trying to make this season work. So I have to give credit to Nagasaki and Mukai for their direction, as well as the episode director who worked on this particular episode, because I do feel as though they did a good job. Again, there's stuff that I wish they did better, but they did a lot of stuff well. As an example, the itch, Shigaraki constantly scratching, or Tenko constantly scratching, and the mom trying to figure out what's wrong with him, like what is causing this rash, right? Like what is causing this itch that he feels. And so they have this like medicine that he takes, and it's clearly not working. And that's because the itch is very clearly stress related, which makes a perfect parallel to his current conflict with Redestro. And again, when you're reading the manga, that aha moment is great. Whereas here, it doesn't hit as hard because Redestro's not a character. He's an obstacle in the anime. In the manga, he's a character. In the anime, he's a guy. He's a bad guy to be overcome. He's a bad guy for the bad guys. Whereas in the manga, he's his own character with his own reasons for doing things, and they're trying to do that in the anime, but I think they're failing completely. I know people who don't even know friggin' Redestro's name. Redestro, starting life again from Destro. But I appreciate that they still managed to have that moment where you realize that, oh, the itch is stress related, much like how Redestro is powered by stress, essentially meaning that Shigaraki is fighting against stress in his past, in the flashback, and also in the present against Redestro, which I think is really, really solid, and that is just a testament to Horikoshi's writing. The symbolism is real. I love it. But the other thing I finally get to talk about, because I thought they did this part really well, I get to talk about Shigaraki's dad, and how much I genuinely hate this man with everything I've got, and when I was reading the manga on stream, so did my chat. Everybody hated this guy, and rightfully so. The manga read-through was vicious, by the way. So, the thing is, like, he's one of those characters where you get why he's doing the thing he's doing, but much like a lot of Fruits Basket characters, just because you understand does not mean that you condone, right? Like, with Fruits Basket, a lot of those parents are also shitty and terrible, but you do not condone what they are doing, and just because you understand, it doesn't make them good, and that's something that the series has played with for a while. You understand why things are happening, but it doesn't make them a good person just because you understand them. And with Shigaraki's dad, I hated this guy. Was I mortified by what happened to him? Yes, because that is scary and weird, but I didn't like this dude at all. He is an insult to Nana completely. He is an insult to her legacy, and he is the reason why Shigaraki ends up the way he does. Shigaraki was very clearly unstable, but I feel as though there could have been a good outcome for him in the same way that there could have been a good outcome for other characters like Toga if they had parents who tried. Like, a huge element of the League of Villains is the fact that society and their own families cast them out. And it was because of either their quirks or their personality traits that could have easily been like catered to, and not so much catered to, but addressed and helped, right? A lot of the League feels as though they're sort of allegories for either like social issues or maybe some sort of mental issue that can be addressed. Maybe not fixed, but addressed. And I feel as though, again, this episode does do a good job at portraying the fact that Shigaraki just needed some help. He just needed a father who would listen, and that's not what he got. Even, like, the thing that I appreciate, because and I do think that the show did this really well, is that when Shigaraki's dad sees Shigaraki and what he's done, his immediate mode is not to run to his child and like try to see what's wrong, even though I feel like most people, unaware that their kid is the reason why this is happening, would try to defend their son from whatever is attacking them, right? Shigaraki even says, I thought it was a villain, even though it kind of was when you think about it. But instead, his initial thought is to grab a broom and beat Shigaraki upside the head with it. And it's because he's just scared, right? Like, he's scared. He knows that it's his son is doing this, and I think to some extent he kind of resents Shigaraki because he knows that, like, Shigaraki is trying to be a hero and he knows what happened to his mom, right? So I think some part of him does kind of resent Shigaraki to some small extent, you know? And the instant he raises his hand to Shigaraki, like, it to me is like, there's a time and a place for that kind of discipline. That wasn't it. You know what I mean? Like, that is uncalled for. And I appreciate that the family does go to him and say, like, hey, if you're going to do that kind of thing again, then we're leaving. Right? Mind you, they didn't leave fast enough. And poor Mon, that poor doggo deserved better. But that does remind me of something that I also want to address this week. And that is the violence is slightly more brutal than it was before. Still have to give them credit. Slightly is still better than not brutal at all, because this arc is brutal. And it is not being portrayed very well in the anime, but this episode actually does do a half-decent job at portraying that. My issue with it, and this is where we're getting into a little bit of the bad stuff, not completely, but just a little bit, is the fact that when characters disintegrate, when Shigaraki gets his hands on, say Mon, right, or his sister, when they disintegrate, they turn gray first and then fall apart, but when you see them again later, they're, like, not gray. They look like regular people, but in pieces, and you don't see the other side of those pieces. In the manga, that doesn't happen. In the manga, they fall apart. They literally, like, crumble to bits, but they don't turn to ash and crumble. They just fall the hell apart. And it's gory and vicious and brutal and mean and awful and great, right? Because it absolutely is how it's the fact that it's that brutal is what breaks Shigaraki, right? He's just a boy when this happens. And so, like, seeing that brutality, it's what really sort of cements him as not well, you know, like, this is what breaks Shigaraki. And I feel as though, like, they do a half-decent job at this, but it's not quite as intense as it is in the manga, but again, given the fact that the show is gonna have censorship, just full stop, which kills me, but it is, I thought that they did a pretty good job. But now the bad. And bad, I only really have one bad. I'm not gonna lie. My one bad is cut content, which, like, big deal, right? Like, it is kind of a big deal in the sense that all these little cuts throughout the entire run of this season add up to make this part lack a lot of the bite that the manga has. Now, mind you, this episode does give me a lot of hope for next season that maybe they can pull this off, because I do feel as though they pulled this episode off. But a lot of things are cut or changed, right? And a lot of it is the brutality of things, whether that's between the censorship or the art style. A lot of the intensity is lost, right? That shot of Shigaraki is great, like, where he's like die, right? Like, that shot is great. Way better in the manga. But that's down to Horikoshi's art style shining through, right? The fact that the manga can go more detailed than the anime can, right? The art style doesn't really allow that. Or the censorship, right? When Spinner gets, like, impaled by that one guy, it's a lot more brutal. And in fairness, like, the Spinner disrespect throughout the whole episode is, like, pretty real. Man had a lot more going for him in the manga. It's not, like, terrible, but again, I do feel as though this episode was slightly more brutal than previous. Like, you do see a lot more blood, right? You see a lot more characters getting sort of banged up, and I appreciate that. But for the most part, it just doesn't feel quite as intense, whether that's down to both the art style or the censorship in the season. That's sort of up for debate. I think it's a bit of both. But other things like Spinner getting completely disrespected feels as though it's a bit of both, right? The Spinner disrespect feels insane to me, because he has a lot more going for him in the manga. Like that scene where he's like stands up for himself hits harder because you spend more time with that moment, right? Like in this, it's just like Spinner was like a shut-in and now he is not. And he saw Stain once and he joined the league and now they are friends. It's like, okay, cool. But we don't have the added context of the beginning of this arc where Spinner is the narrator talking about how the league ended up where they are right now. So because you don't have that, a lot of Spinner's moments don't hit as hard. And that's what I mean by like these little cuts have ended up resulting in a season that just lacks the same bite, because these little cuts mean that you can't have these other scenes pay off later, or you can't have them at all. And so it just lacks a lot of the same bite that the manga does. And I'm telling you, if you haven't read the manga, you guys know me, I was never a manga guy. The My Hero manga slaps so hard that even if you're not a manga person like I wasn't, I now am, but I wasn't at the time, it changes your opinion. And there's also a cameo in the following arc that I am not going to spoil, but it is there, and it will only be in the manga because there's no shot that that's going to make it into the anime. But I will let you go ahead and read that to find out what that is. And manga fans probably know who I'm talking about. But yeah, it's a good episode. I think overall, my overall thoughts, like the good and the bad mixed together, this is a good episode. It's not great. It's a good episode. I hope next week, because next week is the penultimate episode. It's not the finale, but it's the penultimate episode. I would certainly hope that we get something. We see Gigantomachia show up, so we know that that's coming. But, so we know that we're like, you know, it's about to go down. But I would certainly hope that we get some quality Sakuga in next week's episode, because I feel like that's the big thing that was lacking this episode was some Sakuga. There's some moments of a fight between Redestro and Shigaraki, but for the most part, it's still the two of them sort of sizing each other up. Like, the fight hasn't really begun. You do get that great scene where Redestro tries to break Shigaraki's hand, which again is more brutal in the manga. But it's not quite enough. Like, I do feel as though we're reaching a point where we might see some really dope stuff next week, but for now, we'll have to just kind of wait and see. But again, this episode does give me some hope for next season. If you can do this, but maybe a little bit better, not even maybe, do a little bit better than this, next season will be safe. Safe. Anyway, gonna end the video here. And there you have it, everyone. That is this week's video, so I certainly hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot and share if you care. And of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you would like to see more content from yours truly. And before we go, as always, I have to give a big thank you to my wonderful masters who help support this endeavor either by joining us on Patreon or by hitting that join button right beside the sub button to join as a member of the channel. So I would like to thank this month's Masters of Masters, Izevi, Elizabeth Just Elizabeth, Jeremy P, Asaki VT, JCran23, Matt87 Eagle, Shiorans, Stephen G, and Tristan G. Thank you all so much for being especially generous this month. I sincerely appreciate it. A huge thank you once again goes to our masters, and as a reminder, if you would like to join our masters, then be sure to check out that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, or you can check out the join button right beside the sub button to join as a member of the channel and get a nifty badge next to your name. Either way, it is sincerely appreciated. And with that said, it is time for me to end today's video, but before we go, as always, clean your room. It's filthy.